Hello and welcome back to my channel. Happy Halloween. Iha hauna. Happy Samhain. Like many others, I absolutely love Halloween and October and all things scary, spooky, folklore, all things like that. If you have been subscribed to me for the last two Halloweens, I have done kind of Halloween themed videos. Last year I did a reading of some banshee stories on Reddit, and the year before I spoke about some dark foliage plants that I love. This year I thought it would be fun if we could have a little discussion on native Irish plants and their connections with mythology, folklore, and some scary stories that are super old. Plants have always had a huge connection with Irish mythology, folklore, and magic. Whether it be a natural remedy or a cure from a sickness put onto someone from some otherworldly being, something to bring good luck, something superstitious, the history of Irish flora runs super deep. Ethnobotany is the study of the interrelations between plants and humans, whether that be through practical traditional uses of the plants or with culture, and it's something that I find endlessly fascinating, and I really hope you think so too. So in this video I'm going to go through some Irish plants that have a prominent historical connection with Halloween, myths and legends. Firstly, what is Ireland's connection with Halloween and why is it such a big thing? So, some of you may or may not know that Halloween actually originated in Ireland. It came from these old pagan traditions that we have in the festival of Samhain, which comes at the end of October, beginning of November. On this night, as the sun would set, beings from the underworld, or ghosts, fairies, scary beings that would normally not walk on our earth, would be able to walk on our earth for one night only. It was thought that on this night time would stand still, entangling the world of the living and the dead as one. So this is where a lot of those traditions would originate from, such as wearing costumes on that night to appear as scary as possible so that you would fit in with all the dead and ghosts and fairies and creatures so that you wouldn't be attacked or taken advantage of. I'm not going to get too into all of that or I'll get carried away. However, the first plant that I want to discuss that's had a deep connection with Irish Halloween and scary things is Blackthorn, Prunus spinosa. This is a dark, very spiky shrub slash tree, and it's really easy to prick yourself on these spines. It kind of has the appearance, like a lot of these plants I'm going to discuss, as something kind of scary with its black stems, the spikes. It does have berries called sloes, which some people make gin out of at this time of year. A lot of the things I'm going to say in this video are still true today. There's a lot of people that still, although we have modernized and evolved in certain ways, there's a lot of things that certain Irish people just won't do. Like they won't touch a certain plant or they won't build something near a certain plant. And this is like a deep-rooted fear that people have of some of these things. So Blackthorn used to be known as being guarded by the fairy folk. And these are not the kind of fairies that you might be used to. They're not the Tinkerbell, the cute little fairies. These are actually kind of dark, scary fairies that can do really harmful things. Some people believe these little people to be the original natives of Ireland way back when. If you upset or you angered a fairy, they would use their dark magic on you. That could be giving you bad luck, a curse. It could be making someone really sick. And they also were said to replace children with changelings. And changelings are basically a fairy that looks like a child but is really sick and can like create evil spells in the family home, and they would basically take the children and replace it with these evil little child fairies, which is terrifying. These changelings would also like happily receive the love of the parents, even though the parents wouldn't know. I think this originated from a lot of, the lack of medicine a long time ago when children used to be really sick. I think people used to think that they were changelings instead of, you know, their child just being really sick, which is awful. The fairy folk were also fierce guardians of their own lands. So these could be like fairy hills, fairy forts and things like that. Still to this day, there's certain developments in Ireland that will not be built over a fairy fort or a fairy hill. Blackthorn is also associated with the Cailleach, which is kind of like a witch in Irish. The Cailleach was also known as a goddess or ruler of like winter folklore at that time of year, so after Halloween. The Cailleach would emerge during Samhain to take over the year from the goddess of summer, who had previously just ruled the last couple of months. The Cailleach was described as a blue-veiled old woman who had a crow on her shoulder and a blackthorn staff in one hand, which she would use to create magic. The next plant is Hawthorn Crataegus monogina. The hawthorn was also known as the fairy tree, which you know all about the fairies now, and this would basically guard the entrance to the fairy world or the underworld and other realm that the fairies used to live in. So hawthorn is very bad luck to cut down or be developed over. It's probably less important now, but there's still a lot of people that still go by this and would be afraid to cut down a lone hawthorn tree. Generally not like in a hedgerow, it's normally like a standalone hawthorn tree in the middle of a field or something that they would always see as the entrance to the other side. Hawthorn is usually in full berries, they're red berries at this time of year around Halloween. And if a farmer was to cut down a hawthorn tree, it could bring him very bad luck, such as crops dying out, livestock dying out, the soil being infertile, and maybe even sickness to your family. The next plant is Meadowsweet, Philopendula ulmaria, and I absolutely love this little plant. It grows all across Ireland in lots of different types of habitats. I have some of it in my garden. Actually, a lot of these I have in my garden, and it's just has the most beautiful flowers. I'll show you pictures. This meadowsweet was known as one of the 3 most sacred plants by the old druids back in the day. If someone had been affected by the fairies in some way, either by a curse or a sickness, you could put meadowsweet under their bed at night and it would essentially cure them of this. But interestingly, in some places, meadowsweet is also known to be associated with death. And some think this is due to the kind of deep, sleepy smell that you get when you smell the flowers. I'm not really sure what else there is to that, but that's what some people say. This is also another plant that would be said to be protected by the fairy folk, and a lot of people wouldn't cut this plant in between the time period of like Samhain or Halloween and the following May. The Rowan tree, Sorbus acuparia, is also known in these kinds of things, but generally for a different reason. The Rowan tree was seen as a kind of protector tree to otherworldly things or bad things that could happen. This tree has very red berries, and the leaves are arranged in an interesting shape that some say are like a pentagram, but I don't really see that, but that's what they say. So planting a rowan tree in your farm would be said to be a protection from the dead rising again. So very useful around the time of Samhain, and also if planted on your farm, it would be protection for your cattle from any sickness and also from any supernatural forces that might visit you. Cow parsley is a super common plant. A lot of these are really common across our landscape. Cow parsley is known as Anthriscus sylvestris, and this also has another nickname as devil's parsley. Now, a lot of people think that this is because cow parsley looks super similar to hemlock, which is a really poisonous plant, so a lot of people think that it was just confused with hemlock and that's why it got such a bad rap. Cow parsley is said to be used a lot in witchcraft in the olden times, and awfully, children were told stories when they were young that if you picked some cow parsley and you brought it home, your mother would die, which is a really Why are people having all these terrifying stories, especially to children? A lot of these stories you see are connected to children, either the fairy folk, curses, sickness, changelings. It kind of paints a story of how things were back then and the fears that people had. And a lot of these fears came from things that were unknown to them, which still to this day, things that we don't know anything about are generally the most scary to us. And it's just interesting how that was so strongly connected and believed in to a lot of these plants. So the Foxglove digitalis purpurea, which is an absolutely beautiful wildflower in Ireland. I also have this in my garden, and I also actually have a tattoo of it, which I will show you. Where is it? Here. So this is what it looks like, and I will put up photos as well. So there's a lot to be said about this plant. I think because the flowers are arranged in such an interesting way for pollinators that this led to a lot of uses for this plant. It also can be super tall and really stick out in the landscape. So a lot of people would say that this plant would be a great cure for children affected by sickness from fairies. It was also used as a kind of a medicine to revive people that were very weak, so they would eat the juice from 12 leaves, very specific, once a day. So this is a very interesting thing that used to be connected to this plant. So if you would put 3 drops of the nectar on your tongue and 3 in your ear of a child that you suspected to be a changeling, then you would put the child on a shovel on your front door, and then you would swing the door and say, if you're a fairy, away with you. And if the child was a changeling, they would die, and if they weren't, they would survive. So interestingly, that's that. After this point, the child would then recover, if it wasn't a changeling as well, from any sickness that it was feeling previously. For adults that may be under a fairy spell, they would also use foxglove for this. They would prepare a drink made from the leaves, and if the adult refused the drink and said, no, I'm not having any of that, then they were definitely a fairy, and if they took the drink, then they weren't. I wonder how this tasted, because maybe if it tasted really bad, maybe that was also a reason why they didn't want to drink it. I don't know. There was also this interesting thing that people would say, that if someone stepped on fairy grass, I don't really know what fairy grass is, but I assume grass that would be around a fairy fort or a fairy hill or something like that, and if they stepped on this grass, they would get this spell put over them that would mean that they constantly wanted to travel. They just didn't want to stay in one place. They just wanted to explore and, I don't know, do normal things like that. And so to cure them of this, an amulet would be prepared from the foxglove plant, and if they drank this, they would be cured of this constant urge to move around and travel and explore. They used to call this stray sod, which is interesting. So, so like the sods of soil, being astray from your home. A lot of people did stay within their home or their community for the majority of their lives. So that is it for this video. There are, of course, far more plants I could get into. Honestly, the Irish folklore around plants and their uses and deep-rooted beliefs in our culture is endlessly fascinating. There's so much to it. I also have this amazing book which I'm going to show you now. This is called Ireland's Wild Plants by Niall McCocher, and it's all about plants and their connections with Irish folklore, medicines, uses, history, and all things like that. So I will leave that in the description if any of you, if any of you are interested to read it. So that is it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed this a little bit different from me. If you did enjoy it, do let me know, because although a lot of these things are kind of scary and in the, you know, spirit of Halloween, folklore, it doesn't have to be something scary, and if it does interest you, I'd be happy to make more videos like this in the future, maybe more specific videos about certain plants that are used for certain things. I think it's super interesting, and plants just have such a huge effect on our lives, even when we're maybe not so aware of it. Other than that, I hope that you have a happy and safe and fun Halloween. Enjoy yourselves, enjoy the spirit of this time of year. Happy Samhain to all of you, and thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye.